this morning with my mind. Stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind. Stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind. Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 There ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. There ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. There ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 We're gonna walk, we're gonna walk. I'm gonna walk with my mind on freedom. Talk, I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna talk with my mind on freedom. Oh, oh, talk.
Hello, my name is Joseph Hepburn, and I'm a member of the church in Ocean Park. We are all members of the church in Ocean Park, and we are here to welcome you to this unique interfaith community that is dedicated to social justice. Now, you may be wondering if you are welcome here. We are interfaith, so you are welcome if you are Jewish, if you are Muslim, if you are Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Aztec, atheist, or some combination of something else altogether. So you are welcome if you have just come in from a protest march and able to attend any marches right now, or are confused as to what to do. You are welcome if you miss Pride Month activities, or if you are preparing or participating in some that are online. You are welcome if you don't have a job, never had a job, just got a job, or even don't want a job. You are welcome if you are a renter, landlord, or both. We extend a special invitation to those who are single, married, divorced, gay, transgender, rich, poor. Come one, come all. We welcome especially those who are just browsing, just those who just woke up or just out of jail. We don't care if you are more religious than the Pope or haven't been in church since your nephew's baptism. Now we extend a special welcome and invitation to those who are over 70 but not grown up yet, still irritable. Welcome all Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, and those old enough like me to be not classified. We invite soccer moms, tree huggers, latte sippers, vegetarians, junk food eaters. Yes, we do. And today is United Nations Day of Forgiveness. So you are forgiven. Welcome. We invite you to those who are in recovery or still addicted. We invite you if you're having problems, if you're down in the dumps, or if you don't like religion or organized religion. We offer a special invitation to those who work too hard, don't work, can't spell, or because they are bored with staying home all day and heard that this is a strange church. We invite those who are inked or pierced or both. We invite you especially if you have prayer requests or have had religion shoved down your throat as a kid. We invite tourists, doubters, seekers, bleeding hearts, and you. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. Welcome. We usually begin as well by centering ourselves, and we center ourselves now with the Thich Nhat Hanh chant. We'll sing it 3 times. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now 3 times. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in the now. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in the now. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in.
I'm Reverend Janet Gallery McKithen. I'm the minister of the church, and I also welcome you to the church in Ocean Park. This has been quite a week. In addition to other things, today is, or actually yesterday was the 57th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. But you know, in 2013, it was also kind of gutted the protections of the Voting Rights Act and essentially making the law unenforceable. The right to vote is sacred, and we're committed to making sure that everyone can participate. Faith community was instrumental in getting the Voting Rights Act signed. They were leaders in the movement, training, preaching, and marching for equal rights. And now it's our turn to do that again. There was also a horrific accident that some of you may have heard about that was actually near the Gord's family and where they live, where a number of Ashri Ryan and her family all perished yesterday in the car accident. There was a 9-year sentence in Russian prison for Brittany Griner and a move toward justice for the murder of Breonna Taylor. Meanwhile, COVID and monkeypox cases continue to rise. There are so many things that are going on, but I want you to see if you can do this. See if you can put in the chat some of the good things that are happening this week. For example, yesterday there was an amazing book group from our Committee for Racial Justice book group. Secondly, this week we had our first meeting for our second book group, which is an LGBTQ author book group. We've had communication from people who attended the queer prom. Thank you so much. I now feel like I belong and that I am somebody. Our peace camp that we heard about last week is going on. Use one of your emoticons if you can think of something that you're grateful for that happened this past week. Use your emoticon if you got to go outside this week, for example, or if you ate breakfast this morning, or if you slept in a bed, or if you had a roof over your head. Like, put up an emoticon and say, thank you, congratulations, I did that. It's so amazing. There are so many bad things that are challenging things that happen in the world that we really need to be reminded of the good things sometimes. We hold all of it in community. We don't negate the things that have happened or that are happening because we need to deal with them. And we don't negate the good things as well either. It's not one or the other. We can hold them all in community. And there's a person who is going to be speaking today who you all know, Alisa Orduña, who is very good at doing this. For the last couple of years, she has gone through some amazing challenges, but she has also been creative, and her spiritual side has, I think, come reawakened and awakened in a new way, and now is able to do some things that wasn't possible before. So she's holding both of that as we are in community this morning. I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. We in Santa Monica are sitting on the land of the Tongva, the Chumash, and the Quiche. Wherever you are sitting on stolen land that was stolen violently as well. We commit ourselves to be a part of the culture of repair and to work with those Indigenous people who are among us still, to work for a better life and for reparations for all of the Indigenous folks who live among us. Dr. Alisa Orduña is a practitioner, policy analyst, a collaborator, and thought leader in homelessness services in the United States. It's her life mission to reimagine neighborhoods as beloved communities where residents experience belonging and have access to resources to thrive. She has worked on the cutting edge of nonprofit and public sector homelessness policy and programming in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Los Angeles, California, and Santa Monica, California. She has also advised international guests from Brazil, Mexico, and China. Dr. Orduña entered homelessness policy field as a program manager at a large family provider in Philadelphia. She returned to her hometown of Los Angeles in 2011, where she has since been at the forefront of homelessness policy and racial equity through prominent roles at the United Way of Greater Los Angeles, the Office of Mayor Eric Garcetti, and most recently in the Santa Monica City Manager's Office. She currently manages her own consulting firm, Florence Alisa Advancement Network LLC, where she works with US cities and counties to develop homeless response systems through a racial equity lens. Dr. Orduña is a graduate of Xavier University of Louisiana, the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, and Pacifica Graduate Institute, where she received a Ph.D. and MA in depth psychology with a specialization in, get this, community liberation, indigenous and ecopsychology. Her dissertation is amazing too. Ocean Consciousness, Unearthing Anti-Black Biases in the Homeless System Soul, as reflected in the sacred histories of African American experience, introduced an Afro-feminine indigenous approach to understanding and resolve the complex social phenomenon of homelessness and its impact on African Americans in the United States. I don't know anyone else who's doing that. Alisa is the author of Oshun's Calabash, Dancing Across Cuba into the Memory of the Embodied African Soul, and Finding Home and Unearthing the Feminine. To learn more, you can go to adordunaatwork.com. We will hear from Orduña after our song from our music director, Louise Dobbs.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. Yes, I want to sing a song today called Breaths by Issei Barnwell of Sweet Honey in the Rock. But first, I asked Kathleen to come sing a couple of songs for us today, and I'm so pleased that she's here. So I want to introduce her first, so then after the message, she'll go right into the song. Kathleen Benjamin is a licensed spiritual practitioner with Agape International Spiritual Center and with Centers for Spiritual Living. She's the vice president of the Santa Monica Area Interfaith Council and enjoys sharing her love of God with the world. Kathleen's mission is to assist humanity in transforming the world by means of love and unity. She does this through interfaith, sharing of traditions, open-hearted collaboration, prayer, and music. She is building on greatness. I'm so glad you're going to be here to sing for us later. So, this is Breaths by Issei Barnwell. Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the water. I wish those who have died have never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the crying grass. They are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in the crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the water.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Pastor Janet, and that song. Ooh, Louise, you're giving me goosebumps, especially when I think about this morning's topics. Greetings to all of you, to all of your ancestors, to all of those young ones that are continuing in your generations. If you're auntie, uncle, mother, father, grandparent, adopted parent, community parent, just thank you all for being here and having me. All right, just thumbs up if you could see this. Okay, perfect. So when Pastor Janet reached out to come speak, this is a story that's been heavy on my mind. I'm working with a group of women. We're putting together like an anthology of our ancestors, and this is one of the stories that will be in that anthology. But even in writing and preparing for that book, so much continues to be revealed. And I believe it's centered in this journey. This was kind of like a portal of opening. When I've come before, I've talked about the importance of knowing our ancestors, the sacredness of the land that we walk on, and recognizing how many stories the land holds. And this is another example. But I feel that even through this story, it transformed me, and I learned so much more about myself and what it means to really connect to ancestors and land. All of us, when I think about our family trees, I think about this tree that goes deep into the roots. And what this journey taught me was that those roots are really not buried, but weaved into the bones of the ground and really reinforcing the sacredness of the land. This time last Sunday, I was wrapping up a family reunion in Omaha, Nebraska. That's where my dad's from. And this is kind of our extended families. There's probably about 5 generations pictured here. And it's a tradition that we try to do every couple of years, 2 to 3 years. That large family are the descendants of these two, Enrique Henry Orduña and Bessie Hill. Enrique Henry Orduña was a Mexican national. They say he came to the States looking for the man who killed his sister in a domestic violence situation. He ended up in Omaha, Nebraska, and married my great-grandmother, Bessie Hill. At that time, they were married in 1916, and because he wasn't a US citizen, she actually had to give up her citizenship and became a Mexican national because women had to go with the nationality of their husband. Both did not receive their citizenships until the 1940s. What's so profound and what was always interesting to me was she was the first generation born free. So after the period of enslavement, and what she must have gone through in giving up her citizenship so soon after being born free. This is Bessie's grandmother. So my great-great-great-grandmother, Mary. And while many in our family have really looked at Grandpa Henry's side, I wanted to know, again, that question of, well, where did Bessie come from? Who were her parents? What were their stories? And my Aunt Mimi, who was our last sibling of Bessie and Henry, she just passed away in 2019. She also encouraged me. She said, make sure you document Grandma Bessie's, or her mom Bessie's side of the story, because it's pretty interesting. So one of the reunions, she had brought this picture, and I took pictures of it and I kind of put it to the side, did a little ancestry.com work to find out But then we had the sad murder of Breonna Taylor. And in my research, I had found out that great-great-grandmother Mary, who I'll just say Grandma Mary, was born and raised in Kentucky. And so I wrote a letter at the time out of frustration to Senators McConnell and Paul. And I said, no, I'm not a direct constituent, although I am a US taxpayer who contributes to your salaries. More than the money you receive from my working efforts, my great-great-great-grandparents, William and Mary Strange, bled and toiled the land on your land under the US slave system in Warren County, Kentucky. My great-great-great-grandmother, Velma Strange, was one of the first out of 12 siblings to be born free after Emancipation Proclamation, yet continued to work the land for nearly nothing under the system of sharecropping. The exploitation of blood and toil of Kentucky soil by my family's labor fuel the economic system and generate the wealth and power that you and your constituents benefit from today. And invoking the names of these ancestors whose spirits continue to unite us through the spirit of place, I demand justice for Breonna in their name, since recognition that their lives matter was never acknowledged by the government at any level during their lifetimes, nor do government actions make such acknowledgement today. And I was feeling good about myself. I had invoked my ancestors. I had written back to these two powerful men. And then out of the blue, I heard a voice, a woman's voice. Who gave you permission to tell our story? Who gave you permission to really understand who we are and invoke us in such time? People are in the streets talking about what their ancestors have and haven't done, but how many have taken the time to really get to know us? And that's when I began the journey and felt the responsibility that in invoking our ancestors, it's important that we really sit with them and learn who they are. So again, I had, tried to look up ancestry.com, talked to a few elder family members and had gotten so far. And I said, well, if I can't learn more about Grandma Mary, maybe I can learn more about, well, what was the institution of slavery like in Kentucky? What was the context? What did they grow? Like, did everyone enslave people? Did everyone, were families split up? I wanted to learn more. So I reached out to local university and the Bowling Green Historical Society. And after silence for a couple of months, this man, Joe, wrote me back. He said, I don't know if anyone's written you back. I'm the only member of the Historical Society. What do you want to know? And so I shared with him the little bit of information that I have. And Joe, just to his credit, went down to the local court system and just research he had. He started pulling up land deeds. He started pulling up any kind of records that he could find to help me find the story of Grandma Mary. And what I found is that, one of the records that he found was he sent this picture. And honestly, I wasn't prepared for this picture. I told, after this, I said, Joe, you have to send me a trigger warning when you send me information. But this was a picture of the woman who enslaved my grandmother, Mary. And doing my own research, I found that she received Mary through the will of her father-in-law. So she was bequested by her father-in-law, just like one would pass on china. And it's a little bit hard to read. So it says, I give and bequest to my daughter-in-law, Melvina Craig, one Negro girl, Mary, to her and her heirs forever. And I thought this was so important because particularly in conversations on social justice or advancing racial equity, a lot of times it's diverted by, well, what about gender equity? And I think the ownership of women, particularly white women, of enslaved women, is a wound that we don't talk about, but that often will show up. And so it's one that I want to bring forward so we can bring healing to these wounds and build our sisterhood and advance equity on all levels. Here was Mary. So John Craig was Melvina's husband. And so you can see, I just highlighted, as you can see, as part of the practice, no name, just her age, female, and B for Black. And this is when she was about 15. Here she is a little bit older. And Lamb Malvina's first husband, Craig, passed away and she married Richard Lamb. And so we saw where documents of Mary Lamb. And so here is Mary at the age of 22. And by this time, she's had around 3 children, 7, 3, and 1. And next door on the land is Strange, Nathaniel Strange. And I believe, or we believe, the gentleman who's 40 years old, male, is my great-great-great-grandfather, William. And here's just a little map of Smith's Grove and Richard Lamb's land back at the time. I was going on a trip to Tennessee and realized that Bowling Green was only about 2 hours away. So I reached out to Joe and said, hey, you know, you've helped me so much in putting some pieces together. Why don't we grab lunch? So on the way, it's about 2 hours. And it's kind of weird because Kentucky is north of Tennessee. And Tennessee has always been home to me. It's where my mom's family's from, spent childhood holidays, and I go to annual women's retreat. So it's a really safe place for me. But once I crossed that state border, it started pouring rain, the kind of summer kind of rain or spring rain where you can't see the road. And I remember just freaking out and saying, oh my God, what am I doing? No one knows where I'm going. Why am I doing this? And it really felt like going through this portal. So I'm praying and then I'm talking to my grandmother, Mary. I finally was able to get behind a truck and just follow the lights on the truck because I couldn't see the lanes. And slowly the rain started to lift up. And I felt like, okay, this is going to be a profound trip, but I should not stay here too long. And so I met up with Joe, and, you know, it's kind of, I'm just, you know, now I'm starting to think like, what am I doing? I don't know this person, and we're going to drive around these backwoods in Kentucky. Okay, I'm going to do this. So our first stop was at a church, a Black church, because that's where all the cemeteries are. And we believe this was the church that my family would have been affiliated with based on its location. We looked through the grave sites, and there were many old graves along with new ones. So people are still buried here. And I didn't see the names on it. The tree, and what you'll notice is that some people were born under cedar trees, and just rocks were placed as a headstone. And so I knew I was on sacred ground. And I remember I was saying, well, at least I could I don't see my grandmother or my grandfather, but at least I could pray. And I tried to say an ancestry prayer, but the energy was so heavy, I couldn't get it out. And all of a sudden we heard a shotgun ring out like in the next field over. And it was this sense of get out before sundown. You're home, we appreciate you, but this is a history that you don't need to live again. So find what you were trying to look for and get out. This was the land. So this is the house of Richard Lamb. So the house, you know, of the family, Malvina would have lived here, that enslaved my family. And this is the land, you know, minus a few acreage because of the highways and just how land is diverted now, where grandmother Mary would have labored in her lifetime. So it was something really special just being able to touch the earth there, and to also know that since we couldn't find, you know, any markings in the cemetery, Joseph was explaining sometimes families, Black and white, were literally just buried in their land. And so it made me think about the food we consume and the land that we walk, of how much of it is sacred land, because we don't know where all the bones are buried. And as we're driving through kind of the backwoods, you know, I did take him to lunch, and I said, you know, I better call my dad and let him know. And I called it. I took a picture of Joe and sent it to them. I was like, at least there's a record of where I am. But when we were driving around, one of the things that was so impactful was Joe, in his storytelling, I realized, like, it just finally clicked that he knew so much and was able to guide me because his family had enslaved people too. And so it opened up this whole other dialogue that we had, everything from the Civil War and understanding how white families were split up. And that split is still within families of who joined the Confederate versus who joined the Union. You know, hearing how it was a way of life, hearing how toward the end of slavery that, yes, there was a moral obligation that this was wrong, but how whites were upset because they weren't compensated at the end of enslavement period for all of their quote unquote investment. And so it was hard, but it was also interesting just to hear it live, so to speak, and being able to talk to someone. And I didn't realize how much it was impacting me. To their very last cemetery, we ran into a Black male caretaker of the grounds. And I literally just ran over to him. I probably scared him because I just went for a hug and I just stood next to him. And he's kind of looking at us like, what are you doing with this man in these backwoods of Kentucky? Why are you looking at graves? But he just stood there for me, and I was able to kind of regain my composure and just breathe for a minute to finish the trip. And on my way back to Tennessee, I knew things were going to be okay because, of course, the rain had stopped and I saw this rainbow, which was just a symbol of hope, a symbol of you're safe, a symbol of just that covenant, that commitment that even though this is hard to learn, there's going to be something important in this learning that is going to bring healing too. Just to finish up quickly with Mary's story, her and William were finally legally married in 1873 when the state of Kentucky recognized Black marriages. And somehow through all of this time, they had 12 children, or at least living children, and they were able to retain all of them together. Out of the 12, about 4 were born after Emancipation Proclamation, so they were born free in the same family. And many ended up going north to Illinois, Indiana, and of course, Nebraska once slavery was over. Only one of the daughters stayed in the area. I still don't know where Mary is buried or William is buried or the exact years that they died, but I love, like Louise's song, that they continue to live with us. This is Mary's, her daughter, Velma Strange, who is my great-great-grandmother and Bessie as a young girl. And this is just a quick letter where she talks about the importance of living and just the importance of family. And that is a value of something that we continue to hold on to today. And this is a book that's coming out where I go more in my relationship and conversations through dreams, through meditation, through just pouring a cup of coffee and listening every morning to hear the wisdom that Mary wanted me to hear. And that's in a book coming up with a few sisters called Walk a Mile, with 7 sisters coming out this fall. And I just wanted to end with this vision. This is in Tennessee. This is back to my safe place in the woods of Tennessee, and just again, recognizing that each of these trees represent each of our families and each of our family stories and our interconnectedness and the roots of how we're connected, as well as how we we're codependent on each other because we share one earth and how we live together. So I thank you. I realize I'm probably a few minutes over time, so just want to thank you for listening, and just happy to answer any questions or hear any parts of your story that you want to share during the community storytelling.
Wow, that was so amazing. Thank you so much. So I'm going to dedicate this song to your story. And here we go. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arise. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of the dark black night. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment so you could see. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. You were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird, fly.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
My heart is warmed, and thank you, Dr. Alisa Orduña. I really, so much in my heart right now. So now is the time that we get to have a moment to share or to ask a question or like Alisa was saying, or share a bit of your story, but maybe a little briefly, just a piece of something, or Craig Ali, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It's interesting. You've done probably one of the more difficult things in terms of looking at ancestry, because by and large, prior to 1870, African Americans weren't considered as people. So I'm wondering specifically what, I guess you could say, hints or things of encouragement that you could say and or do to more or less make that difficult task a little bit easier, if there is something. Because I personally have an idea, but I don't know my father's forebearers, and I'm struggling, with that idea. I know my mother's, but I don't know my father's. So if there is something in the way of encouragement that you can give to me in regards to looking at that, I'd be appreciative.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. I would say one, don't give up. And it's kind of like when you get a splinter, sometimes it is that initial, it could be painful. Well, it can't be, it is painful, but it also brings this deep, profound sense of healing, because you'll start to learn it from your ancestors' perspective, which is something we're not always taught. And so in it, you start to learn their strengths, their resilience. How did they survive the day-to-day? That we weren't just blank pieces of paper that were imprinted on, but there was so much, a lot. Like they say, my great-great-grandmother Mary knew where she came from in Africa. So there's strength in learning their stories. So don't give up, and just know that things that are painful will also open up the medicine for you, and you'll just feel this greater sense of who you are, and can pass that on to your mom and everyone else in your family. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Alisa. Bob, and then Audrey, and then Trudy.
Well, thank you for a rich and beautiful presentation. Just one little question. I noticed in the title of your talk, the word reconciliation. And I know that some people say have a preference for a word like transformation, on the basis that at least between blacks and whites, there wasn't an initial togetherness that was then broken up that could be repaired. And I'm just curious about your preferences about those terms, and why they are what they are.
Great question. I think for me, before we get to transformation, it would have been easy for me to walk away from that triplet hate. And when I talked to people were like, they were shutting down, saying, oh, this shouldn't happen, this shouldn't, and having their critique. But I said, we will never evolve our consciousness until we work through this pain together. So I think the reconciliation for me was learning to listen to the stories, accept, reject where I am, but also to just be in this space where I could be open to continuing talking and continuing to wanting to work toward that transformation, versus isolating and just saying, I can't, they'll have to figure out how to heal, and I'm just going to go over here with my people. I just will, for whatever God's calling is on me, to say, no, we've got to figure out how to have the conversations and have them truthfully, and have them to the point where we work through the pain and these were documents that were facts, and it's like, we have to work through this and have ownership and have accountability for that. So the reconciliation to me is that first step on a path toward transformation and higher consciousness building.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much. Audrey, there you are.
Hi, thank you. Alisa, thank you for sharing your journey with us. And I was wondering,
what you think it would be like to have a conversation with one of your grandma Marys, with the descendants of your grandma Mary's enslavers of Malvina.
Mm.
I think Joseph prepared me for that. And I would be open to that because I would want them to, how are they processing this history? You know, how are they, what's the impact? How have they benefit, you know, from the history? So I would want to know. It reminds me, in doing this research, I reached out to ancestry.com. I said, I don't want my descendants to have to go through this process again. How do I put an enslaver on our family tree without making them a relative? You know, so it's like those questions. And I want them to add us to their family tree, you know, as again, so people know this history, because it makes us who we are. And even when we bring healing through it, it's not to relive it, it's just to acknowledge the history that happens, because it's shaped us in many different ways. So I would be open to it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alisa. Trudy.
Good morning. It's so good to see you here today. And I didn't quite know what to expect from the topic of your talk. And I'm so glad that you brought this topic forward, because it's important for folks to know how Blacks are reclaiming who they are and using their very own ancestral power and spirituality in doing so. And I mean, for me, it came really easy because one of my cousins, one of my third cousins, is a historian. And so she documented so much of my mother's side of the family's history. And so it just sort of laid itself open. And I made one of those trips back to Texas through the graveyard and just seeing how this grew within you and how it formed and informed your work just puts a smile on my face. And I can't wait for the book, because I just think it's something that helps all of us to branch out and to grow, just like those trees, just having that knowledge about who we are and knowing that we can dig deeper, like Craig wants to put the puzzle into place. So thank you so much for that encouragement.
Thank you, Mother Trudy.
Thank you. Gina.
Yes. I just wanted to thank you so much for your presentation. I think I could have listened to you for hours. That's how much I was into everything that you said and where you went. But I just have a quick question though. So I lost my parents very, very young. I have no knowledge of my dad at all, other than the city that he was born. And with my mom, I don't have very much information on her either. So with that all said, would you say that starting with ancestry would be the first start if you were trying to locate, you know, I mean, with my daughter, her dad is able to give all kinds of information, you know, but with me, because, I was like in under teens, I was a preteen when I lost, and a teenager. So I don't have that information to share with my daughter. So, I mean, would I start with ancestry?
The first part I would start with, Gina, is a spiritual intention of what you hope to gain from them. Because what I found that sometimes there's so much shame in how stories will be interpreted or how they will be used. And so just kind of like an intention with your ancestors that you are pulling on their strength and their love to share with your daughter so she can continue to pass on their legacy and their stories, and that you're doing it in a non-judgmental way. And to me, then when you go on to Ancestry, things just start to open up for you. And Ancestry is so good now with so much access to census data, marriage records, death records, veteran affairs. Like there's just so much information now that it will open. But I found, particularly even on this path with grandmother Mary, I had to talk with her to let her know that I was holding all aspects of her life that I may find out as sacred and no shame, and won't be using them to weaponize. You know, it was just this
Right.
interesting spiritual dialogue. And I found out once I did that, the information started flowing like a river.
So another question, because of what you said, let's say, for instance, my mother was in the Korean War. Would I be able to go to the Veterans Administration and get any kind of pictures or anything? Because I have none of my sisters, we don't have any pictures of my mom. We may have one picture of my mom. We don't have anything else.
Ancestry, believe it or not, because you may have other relatives that are out there, or
they're deceased.
But it's weird how far they go back, newspaper clippings or different kind of records. So I would try that. And I forgot, I think it's family. I'll put it in the chat, but there's a free version of ancestry.com. And it's fueled more by the Church of the Mormons, which have done this extensive.
Like Church of the Latter-day Saints?
Yes. You can go to their library too, because that's where this family search is what it's called.
Family search.
Family search, yes. And ancestry.com, it's where they pull from. So you could even start there, and you may be surprised what you find.
Yes, because I just really want to know, where did we come from? Why do I look like this? Why am I always mistaken for like Ethiopia, an Ethiopian? So it would be just nice to know exactly where, where are my roots?
And you'll start learning by where, let's say you can get to where your mother's parents were from. You start to know the travel routes. So for instance, on my dad's side, it was Virginia, because Kentucky was a part of Virginia for a long time. So it was more that the groups that came in through Virginia, where my mom was more deep South, a more traumatic experience, and they came in more through the Carolinas. And so and from there, we start to know which groups were more brought in through the Carolinas. So give yourself time too. It's going to be a process, and like every step is going to take you a little bit deeper.
Okay, thank you so much.
And reach out anytime. I'm happy to help you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Bonner, Edward.
Hello. Listen, that was a wonderful presentation, just excellent.
It was.
I, as a gift to my sister, a friend of hers gave her our family. She went out and researched our whole family and gave her a folder of all of our family's history as a gift. Hours and hours. And since then, I have gone on ancestry.com and also on Family Search and researched our family. And I've gotten back to my family's history is a Lewis. Part of it is a Lewis. It goes back to England. And so that's really, I was talking to my sister yesterday. She said, oh, she's protected by the Lewises. And one of the things that had happened, some dramatic things happened in our family. One, I found one ancestry it said African. This person was born into World War I and as a soldier, and they listed him as African. It's the first time I had seen the word African written on a piece of paper. And then I found a marriage record where someone was a sharecropper on one piece of land, and right next to it was another piece of land, and the woman on that land was a slave, and they married. So it's such a history. And on my wife's side, her family goes all the way back to signers of the Declaration of Independence. So my grandsons, they have this rich history. and also there's also the Native American. My grandfather, he was kidnapped by a white man. The white man was racist, was going to lynch him, and my grandfather got loose, and he did not run. He killed the man. He did not run because if he ran, the man would have caught him and killed him. So he said, and he stayed and he killed him, and then he ran and he lived with the Native Americans. He went home, packed his bags, and went and lived with the Native Americans. That's how he met my grandmother, who was Native American. So I've got this really incredible history. But for the longest time, I thought that my grandfather killed this man because he hated him. I said that, anger. And then I realized he didn't. He did it because he loved himself. He loved himself. He loved himself so much that he didn't have fear. He didn't have this great fear that, I love me. So if I love myself, then I protect myself. It's not something against you. You know what I mean? And that's the same thing I like to see. Or I was talking to a young trans person. And I said, if you love yourself, you'll protect yourself. It's not about me protecting you, but you protecting yourself. If someone does something to you, you tell them. And then I'll back you up, but it's up to you. You have to own your power. Anyway, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And you brought up a good point too, is that it's important to let what you find lead you, because we may have these ideas of what our family history is or what it went through or who we are, but you've got to, and sometimes you have those weird, like, wait, England or Spain or, like what? A colonizer, like what? That's in your history. And you have to really be open to that too. Ms.
Right.
Gail.
Thank you, Alisa. Gail?
Thank you so much. That was so rich. I'm very moved. As a white person, it's pretty easy to find our history. It's well documented, but I had the experience of being able to go back to Wales, where I knew that my family historically had come from there. And what I wanted to share was that this incredible feeling I had when I was there, and I found the parish church where they got married, and just the land, that feeling of feeling connected to the land. I had never had that feeling before, but it was like I felt comfortable. I felt safe. I felt seen, on this land. It was a very powerful experience. So I can share that with you.
No, I love that, because sometimes when I share my story, and particularly with younger people who identify as white, there's this shame of wanting to know their history. But to me, it's so important because it brings so much healing. And to me, the more you know about yourself and your family, the more rich and authentic and at peace you are. To me, it is how we're going to kind of move forward to that transformative piece that Mr. Bob was talking about. And so thank you for sharing your story, and please encourage others to share their stories too. It's surprising how many people don't know their grandparents, and we've got to tell these stories. So
Thank you, Alisa. So we have two more, if they're kind of brief, Craig and then Chuck.
I'll be brief. This was a really good conversation, and it brings up, I'm like, if you go to 23andMe, I'm boringly Northern European. I was adopted into, a Northern European family in a closed adoption. And so I know virtually nothing of my genetic parents, and that I've looked a bit. The most I know, my mother shared with Claudia, my wife. And so and then having kids, it realizes it's still, for me, a kind of journey of understanding. And it's nothing against my parents and their family history, which is also sort of interesting and has holes in it and all kinds of things because of record keeping and that sort of thing. but just as something to continue to think about. And I just really enjoyed your presentation and the way you've approached it. So thank you, Alisa. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Craig, and good luck to you. Those holes will start to fill in soon to the level that you need them. Thank you.
Yeah, it is a different thing when you're adopted, like from closed adoption. It's hard. Chuck?
Hi. Interesting. And we white people do have the advantage of being able to go back with recorded records of our ancestry. And what an advantage. And the one thing I'd like to share is I learned on Facebook, I guess it was, or on the computer somewhere, that if I have a grandparent or a great grandparent that is born in Ireland, then I qualify for citizenship of Ireland. And guess what? I have a great grandmother who was born in Ireland, and I'm going to figure out how to become an Irish citizen, dual citizenship. And I've always loved everything Irish, especially the music. Just I would like to say there would be no bluegrass music if it wasn't for Ireland. And I don't know, there's something about Ireland that really appeals to me, and I've never been there. But I may be an Irish, citizen because of the fact, the fate that I had a great grandmother born there. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much, Chuck. And thank you again, Alisa. Thank you all for sharing. I think when learning more about who we are individually helps us more as a community to be more whole. The more we can know about ourselves and each other, the more we can be a more whole community. So I really appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Amen. So everyone join me in taking a big cleansing breath, just a big breath in and exhale. Beautiful. This song is called The Breath of God. The breath of God is breathing me, and resting in the breath of God, I know that all is well. The joy of God is joy in me, and resting in the joy of God, I know that all is well. The peace of God is peace in me, and resting in the peace of God, I know that all is well. The breath of God is breathing me, and resting in the breath of God, I know that all is well. I know that all is well.
And now we have a chance to unmute and hold hands with each other virtually, and hold hands with people who aren't here, people that we don't know, people that we step over, people that we disregard, people that we learn from. Hold hands with our ancestors, hold hands with people who are coming, and say together, carry on. 1, 2, 3.
Carry on.
Carry on.